A single phone call changed everything. August 17th, 1943. World War II is at its most critical turning point in the Mediterranean, and Winston Churchill, the man who designed the entire Sicily Campaign, receives news that destroys his carefully built narrative in one sentence. General George S. Patton has taken Messina. Not Bernard Montgomery, Britain's most celebrated commander. Not the hero Churchill personally chose to lead the charge. An American general dismissed as a flank protector has just rewritten the story of who leads the Western Alliance. So the question that has haunted historians ever since is this: was the race to Messina a military operation, or a war within a war, fought not against the enemy, but against an ally? The year is 1943, and the Allied coalition carries a quiet fault line running directly between London and Washington. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister and the dominant voice shaping Allied grand strategy, holds a vision that few in his inner circle dare challenge. The Mediterranean, he argues passionately, is the soft underbelly of Axis-controlled Europe. Strike Sicily, topple Mussolini, open the sea lanes, and march toward Rome. It is an elegant strategy, and it is also, at its core, a British strategy, authored by British planners and designed to showcase British military leadership on the world stage. The Americans, led by General George C. Marshall, the U.S. Army Chief of Staff, resist the plan initially. They want a direct cross-channel assault into France, the shortest road to Berlin. But Churchill prevails. Operation Husky is approved at the Casablanca Conference in January 1943, the largest amphibious landing in history up to that moment, involving 2,760 ships and landing craft drawn from as far as Scotland, the United States, Egypt, and Lebanon. 7 divisions would land simultaneously on the southern and eastern coasts of Sicily. The objective: capture the island, and above all, capture Messina, the port city at Sicily's northeastern tip, just 2 miles from the Italian mainland. The command structure tells you everything about how Churchill sees this campaign. General Harold Alexander, a British officer, commands the 15th Army Group, overseeing both armies. Montgomery's British 8th Army receives the primary eastern axis, the direct road up the coast toward Messina. Patton's U.S. 7th Army lands to the west, assigned to protect Montgomery's left flank. It is, in plain language, a supporting role. Patton understands this, and it fuels a controlled but burning resentment. Here is the common misconception this story must dismantle. Most casual accounts of the Sicily Campaign portray the race to Messina as an improvised rivalry, 2 competitive generals simply running a spontaneous contest. The archival record tells a completely different story. Patton's personal diary, held at the Library of Congress, and the daily war diaries of the U.S. 7th Army, declassified from the National Archives, reveal a deliberate, premeditated campaign within a campaign. Patton did not stumble into a race. He engineered one systematically and with cold calculation. On July 10, 1943, the landings begin. Patton's forces come ashore along the Gulf of Gela on Sicily's southern coast. Within hours, the Americans face a severe test. German armored units of the Hermann Göring Division reach the beachhead faster than Allied intelligence anticipated. Tiger tanks roll toward American positions at Piano Lupo, crushing foxholes and machine gun nests in the early morning chaos. American infantry hold their ground through naval gunfire support from a U.S. light cruiser firing 6-inch shells at close range. The beachhead survives, but just barely. Montgomery's 8th Army lands to the east and moves quickly towards Syracuse. For the first week, the British advance appears dominant. Then the terrain and the enemy intervene. German paratroopers and the rugged volcanic landscape around Mount Etna slow Montgomery's drive toward Catania to a near standstill. Dug-in German 88mm anti-aircraft guns, deployed in a direct-fire ground roll, tear through British armored columns. Montgomery faces a strategic wall. Now comes the moment that ignites the race. On July 13th, General Omar Bradley's U.S. II Corps has advanced inland and is within 1,000 yards of the Vizini-Caltagirone Road, Route 124, a critical east-west highway across the center of the island. Holding this road gives the Americans a powerful inland access toward Messina. Then Alexander issues an order that stuns Bradley and enrages Patton. Montgomery needs Route 124. Patton tells Bradley directly, "Monty's to get the Vizini-Caltagirone Road. You'll have to side-slip to the west with your 45th Division." Bradley replies with barely restrained anger, "My God, you can't allow him to do that." Patton says evenly, Sorry, Brad, but the changeover takes place immediately. This single decision handing a key road to the British becomes the spark. Patton says nothing more to Bradley that day, but his diary that night burns with intent. If Alexander and Montgomery want to relegate the U.S. Army to a flanking secondary role, Patton will use that western axis not to protect the British flank, he will use it to reach Messina first. The western route becomes his racecourse. Patton moves northwest toward Palermo. His forces advance at a pace that shocks Allied headquarters. By July 22nd, Palermo falls, and with it, over 50,000 Axis prisoners. The speed of the American advance captures headlines worldwide. But Patton has no interest in Palermo as a destination. It is a pivot point, a supply base, a port, and now the road runs east along Sicily's northern coast toward Messina. He issues the order to his field commanders that turns an operational advance into a declared competition. The primary source document, Patton's own written directive, states without ambiguity, "This is a horse race in which the prestige of the U.S. Army is at stake. We must take Messina before the British. Please use your best efforts to facilitate the success of our race." Montgomery, shown the intelligence summary about American movements, reportedly treats the directive with dismissal. He does not yet understand that Patton has already left him behind. Bradley's Second Corps drives north to the coast and then east along Highway 120, the inland road running parallel to the northern coast. Patton pushes two axes simultaneously, the coastal highway 113 and the inland highway 120, a pincer of American steel converging on the same destination. German General Hans Valentin Hube commands the 14th Panzer Corps in a masterful fighting withdrawal. Hube uses every hill, every river crossing, every narrow mountain pass to slow the Americans. At Troina, from July 31st to August 6th, the 1st Infantry Division fights one of the most difficult engagements of the entire campaign, requiring 7 days in coordinated artillery, air, and infantry assaults to dislodge a reinforced German defensive position. The German resistance is professional and disciplined, and Hube is executing a plan Churchill and the Allied High Command have not fully anticipated. Since early August, the Germans have been conducting a systematic evacuation across the Strait of Messina to the Italian mainland. Under cover of an extraordinarily dense anti-aircraft screen, German engineers run a ferry operation transferring troops, vehicles, artillery, and equipment in organized convoys across a 2-mile stretch of water. The Allied air and naval forces, failing to coordinate a sustained interdiction campaign, cannot stop it. So here is the first of 3 open questions that will shape everything that follows. If the Allies cannot close the strait, what exactly is the race for? What does taking Messina actually mean militarily if the enemy escapes? And what does Churchill say when he learns the answer? Patton does not wait for that answer. On August 8th, he flies personally to visit his divisional commanders at the front. He tells General Lucian Truscott of the 3rd Infantry Division, the spearhead pushing along the coast, that speed is the only currency that matters now. Truscott, known for the Truscott Trot, a fast march pace he had drilled into his men since North Africa, confirms the advance will not slow. Patton leaves the front satisfied. His forces are closer to Messina than Montgomery's by a margin that is growing every day. To accelerate past German defensive lines anchored in the mountains, Patton authorizes 3 amphibious end runs along the northern coast, landing troops by sea behind enemy positions to cut off the withdrawing German columns. The first, at Sant Agata on August 8th, forces a German regiment to abandon a prepared defensive line. The second, at Brolo on August 11th, lands Colonel Lau Bernard's battalion of the 30th Infantry Regiment directly behind German lines. The operation is costly. Bernard's force is nearly surrounded before relief units break through, but it forces another German withdrawal. Churchill will later describe these amphibious flanking operations as unprecedented demonstrations of American tactical innovation. But in the moment, the operations come at a price measured in lives. This is the alternate reality that must be acknowledged. If Patton had not taken these calculated risks, if the amphibious landings had failed and Bernard's battalion had been destroyed, the American advance would have stalled in the mountains. Montgomery's forces, pushing through Catania from the south, might have reached Messina first after all, and the story of who leads the Western Alliance would have been written very differently. On August 16th, Patton authorizes a 3rd amphibious landing near Spadaforo, east of Brolo. German resistance is now collapsing under the dual pressure of American advances from two directions. Hube's 14th Panzer Corps is in the final phase of evacuation, an operation the Germans will execute with remarkable efficiency, moving over 100,000 troops, 9,800 vehicles, 47 tanks, and 94 artillery pieces across the strait before Allied forces close in. The failure to interdict this evacuation remains one of the significant unresolved debates in the historiography of Operation Husky. August 17, 1943. Before dawn, advance elements of the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division Truscott's men enter the outskirts of Messina. The last German and Italian units have already crossed the strait. At 6:30 in the morning, American soldiers stand in a city that was, just weeks earlier, the most heavily defended objective in the Mediterranean theater. Messina is theirs. George S. Patton enters the city at 10:30 a.m., wearing his polished helmet and cavalry boots, accepting the formal surrender of the city from the Italian authorities. Montgomery arrives later that same morning with a retinue that includes, by multiple contemporary accounts, a set of bagpipes, a gesture widely interpreted as his intention to stage a triumphant British entrance to overshadow the Americans. Patton records the moment in his diary with characteristic directness. He writes that he believes, "The general was quite sore that we had got there first. The bagpipes play in an empty square. The cameras have already recorded the American entry. The narrative belongs to Patton." Now return to Winston Churchill and that phone call. The Prime Minister had constructed an entire geopolitical narrative around this campaign. British strategy brings America into the Mediterranean. British generalship, specifically Montgomery, the hero of El Alamein, leads the decisive drive to Messina. American forces provide support and learn from their British counterparts. This narrative, so carefully assembled, does not survive August 17th. The Americans have not supported the British. They have outrun them, outmaneuvered them, and reached the finish line first in front of the world's press. Churchill's public response acknowledges the American achievement with measured grace, amphibious flanking operations. He speaks of Allied solidarity, but the private record, the correspondence preserved in the Churchill archives at Cambridge, and the memoirs of those present at his headquarters, reveals a man recalibrating. The ease with which American forces swept to Palermo and then pivoted to Messina demonstrated something Churchill had not fully incorporated into his strategic calculations. The U.S. Army, which had stumbled badly at Kasserine Pass in February 1943, had learned with extraordinary speed. The shock of Kasserine had burned away in 6 months. What stood in its place was a military force that could match and, in open terrain, exceed British operational tempo. And here is the second open question, now answered by the evidence. Was Churchill's campaign in Sicily ultimately a British success or an American one? By the metrics he defined at the outset, capture Messina, topple Mussolini, open the Mediterranean sea lanes, it is a success. But the general who captures Messina is American. The face of Allied victory in the Mediterranean, from this moment forward, carries an American identity. Churchill understands this. It reshapes every subsequent negotiation about command structures and campaign priorities between London and Washington. The strategic consequences extend far beyond Sicily's shores. On July 24, 1943, while the battle for the island is still ongoing, Italian King Victor Emmanuel III has Benito Mussolini arrested and replaced as Prime Minister by Pietro Badoglio. The Italian government immediately opens secret peace negotiations with the Allies. Hitler, confronting the collapse of his southern partner, is forced to redirect German forces from the Eastern Front to Italy, canceling the planned continuation of the Kursk offensive. The fall of Sicily thus contributes directly to the permanent strategic shift on the Eastern Front that the Soviet Union has been fighting towards since 1941. Yet the third open question, the one that haunts the victory, is this. Did the Allies actually win what they came to win? When American forces enter Messina on August 17th, the German army is not there. Over the preceding 6 days, Hube's 14th Panzer Corps has moved more than 100,000 soldiers, tens of thousands of vehicles, and nearly all of their heavy equipment across the strait to the Italian mainland. The National World War II Museum's analysis of the Messina Strait evacuation describes it as one of the most effective tactical withdrawals of the European War. Those same German divisions will be waiting on the Italian mainland, and they will make the Allies pay for every mile between Salerno and Rome. Churchill is aware of this failure, and it colors his response to the Messina victory with something more complex than simple congratulation. He had argued that the Italian campaign would be swift, that a demoralized Italy would fold, and Allied forces would march rapidly north. The German decision to defend Italy aggressively, reinforced by the troops evacuated from Sicily, destroys that assumption. The Italian campaign becomes a grinding, costly, two-year struggle that ultimately validates every concern Marshall and the American planners had raised at Casablanca. For Patton, the victory at Messina arrives at the worst possible moment in his personal trajectory. Even as his troops enter the city, a scandal that will nearly end his career is accelerating toward the press. In early August, during visits to field hospitals near the front, Patton encounters two soldiers he believes are avoiding combat. He strikes them an incident that General Eisenhower considers a career-ending transgression. Eisenhower orders Patton to issue formal apologies to each soldier and to the assembled troops of both units. Patton complies, but his diary entry makes his private feelings clear. It is rather a commentary on justice when an army commander has to soft-soap a skulker to placate the timidity of those above. The slapping incidents are not disclosed to the public until November 1943, when war correspondent Drew Pearson breaks the story. Public reaction in the United States is severe. Congress debates whether Patton should be removed from command permanently. Eisenhower, who understands that no Allied order of battle commands armor and maneuver warfare with Patton's lethal efficiency, refuses to relieve him, but sidelines him for nearly a year. The man who captured Messina watches the Normandy landings from England. The full toll of Operation Husky establishes the scale of what was accomplished and what it cost. Allied forces sustained approximately 23,000 casualties, roughly 9,700 Americans, nearly 11,000 British, and 2,400 Canadians, wounded or missing during 38 days of combat. Axis forces suffered approximately 165,000 casualties, of whom 135,000 were captured and 30,000 killed or wounded. The island is cleared. The Mediterranean sea lanes are open. Mussolini is gone, but the German army, intact and reinforced, waits across the strait. Churchill said in the measured language of public statesmanship that the fall of Sicily was a turning point. What he understood, privately confirmed by the archival record, is that it was also a turning point in the balance of power within the alliance itself. The Americans had demonstrated at Messina that they did not need British leadership to define the outcome of a campaign. They would define it themselves, on their own terms, at their own pace. From August 17, 1943 onward, that knowledge sits permanently in the room at every Allied planning table. George S. Patton took Messina. Winston Churchill acknowledged it. And the world that emerged from that acknowledgement is one in which American military power speaks for itself, not as a supporting actor in someone else's story, but as the decisive force of the 20th century, proven under fire on a sun-scorched island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Churchill built the Sicily Campaign to prove British leadership. Patton entered Messina first and rewrote that story in a single morning. Here is the question for you. If Montgomery had reached Messina before Patton, even by just 1 hour, do you think the balance of power between Britain and America inside the alliance would have shifted differently for the rest of the war? Leave your answer in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.